We can confirm to you that Herat has fallen this evening. Residents there, we talked about half a dozen people who all said the same thing, that there were Taliban in all the streets in the centre of town, that they had come into town this afternoon, pushed through. They had been trying to get into the city for about a month, but they made a breakthrough, crossed through the front line this afternoon, and they broke into the prison, they got into the police compound, they got into the governor's compound, they released all the prisoners. Residents telling us that they had prisoners. One man said, my relatives were in the prison and now they're in my house. And they could hear gunfire, but they said, us driving through town, that gunfire is not coming from clashes from security force. It is celebratory gunfire coming from the Taliban. They said, from what they could see, that security forces seem to just give up without a fight. Now, it is a huge prize, as you said, for the Taliban, the third biggest city in Afghanistan, and a huge loss for the government. It is the biggest city in the West, and they had tried very, very hard to hold on to it. They had empowered the former governor of Herat, his name is Ismail Khan, to create a local uprising movement who had worked with their special forces, using airstrikes also to keep the Taliban out, but the Taliban breaking through this evening. It is not the only place that the Taliban are claiming this evening. They have also claimed a province near that in the west called Baghis. We've talked to local journalists there that said heavy fighting has been ongoing in that province, that there are police and intelligence compounds have been captured, but there is still heavy fighting in the governor's compound there, so not entirely captured by the Taliban, but certainly on the cusp of going. There is also heavy fighting in Kandahar city. Now that is incredibly important because it is the second biggest city in Afghanistan. It is the birthplace of the Taliban. They have been fighting incredibly hard to get in. The government has sent a lot of their most elite special forces to keep the Taliban out. US airstrikes have been ongoing there to try and push the Taliban out for at least a month, but they managed to get into the heart of the city today. We saw videos of it, but communications are very poor. So it's incredibly hard to stand up exactly where they're at now. I talked to someone just a short time ago who said heavy fighting is ongoing, but it's hard to tell exactly what the Taliban now control in Kandahar city with communications down. Now, earlier today, the province of Ghazni fell. Ghazni city is just 150 kilometres from Kabul. It's the closest city to Kabul that they have captured. Here's our report on that.
Taliban fighters overlooking land that would soon be theirs. The armed group tried to take Ghazni 3 years ago but failed. This time it had control in a matter of hours.
You can see our fighters with tanks in the city. We're doing an operation heading towards the police headquarters. There was a prison break and the prisoners were released. The Taliban are here and we're moving forward to capture more places. Keep watching us.
Ghazni Governor Daoud Laghmani is accused of doing a deal with the Taliban for safe passage to escape to Kabul. These Taliban yell, the governor has run away. Flaunting trucks and equipment claimed in recent conquests, the Taliban was seen escorting the governor through its new territories. Afghan police arrested him shortly after for surrendering without a fight. Ghazni is the 10th provincial capital to fall in 7 days. Prior to this week, the last time the Taliban had held a provincial capital was 5 years ago, and that was only for a matter of days. Its location is also significant as the gateway to the south. Of the provincial capitals that have fallen, Ghazni is the closest to Kabul, just 150 kilometres away. The Taliban now hold about 2/3 of the country, including much of northern Afghanistan, provinces in the west and rural areas in the south. All now leverage they're taking into negotiations with the Afghan government.
They've got what they wanted from the Doha process. They've got a US troop withdrawal, which means a NATO troop withdrawal. And I can't see why they would, at this stage, compromise. They think they can take Afghanistan by force, and that's what they're going to try and do over the next few months.
Here in the capital, concern is growing about the possibility of a Taliban takeover.
We worry a lot when we see the Taliban capturing the provinces. It's natural for us to worry about it. We are asking the Taliban not to destroy cities. They should do a peace agreement. They should agree to a government. They can be in power and we can be in power together.
The government is bringing some special forces back to Kabul to bolster security. It means risking the loss of more provinces to the Taliban.
So there is heavy fighting ongoing in 4 other provinces. So this is not stopping. The Taliban are not stopping yet. They are turning their attention, now that they've claimed these other provinces, they're turning their attention to others. Tonight, I'm told that heavy fighting has erupted in Logar, Faryab, Zabul, Paktika. In Helmand, they say that they think they are making inroads in the provincial capital of Lashkargah, which has essentially been under siege for about 2 weeks. But of all of these places they are fighting, the most attention will be on Kandahar city, the second biggest city, hundreds of thousands of people there, the birthplace of the Taliban. It would be a huge morale boost for the Taliban to get it, and the government are fighting very hard to keep it.
Charlotte Bellis, thank you very much indeed. Well, the US is moving 3,000 more troops to Kabul to help pull out its embassy staff from the capital. So for more on that, let's go to Shihab Ratanzi, who's in Washington, D.C. Tell us what they're saying about this particular mission.
Well, the State Department spokesperson said that there would be a substantial reduction of the staff at the embassy in Kabul, the U.S. embassy in Kabul. It will now be a core diplomatic presence there, although he kept on insisting that the embassy would remain open. There are about 4,000 people based at the embassy in Kabul, of which about 1,400 are U.S. citizens, the rest from third countries. The Pentagon briefing is just underway now, so he's just given us a barrage of numbers now. So you mentioned 3,000 troops will be sent to Kabul in the next 24 to 48 hours to secure Hamid Karzai International Airport, where these staff will be relocated. That's 3 infantry battalions, 2 Marines, 1 Army. In addition, though, lots of other troops will be heading into the theater. 1,000 personnel will be moving to Doha, Qatar initially to help process special immigrant visas. That's where that number, you know, the thousands of non-US citizens becomes important at the embassy. So presumably this will help facilitate that, although it's not clear whether, the Pentagon spokesperson was just asked, well, where are these non-US citizens going to end up? He didn't have an answer, nor did he seem completely sure as to where the 1,000 personnel now going to Doha will probably end up to help with the processing. And finally, there will be another infantry battalion moving to Kuwait just in case they're needed, in case of emergency, it seemed. If things deteriorated even further and they needed more than the 3,000 troops that are now being deployed in the next 24 to 48 hours to Hamid Karzai Airport, then they will be ready to be deployed in Kuwait. There are anticipations of airlift, so the troops at the airport will be airlifting the personnel out. There have been reports there as well that the U.S. has been considering just relocating the embassy wholesale to the airport. That has not been confirmed by any of the spokespeople we heard before. As to how long these troops will be in Afghanistan, both the spokespeople for the State Department and the Pentagon taking pains to say, look, this is not a return to redeployment of U.S. troops to Afghanistan. Clearly there's a schedule here. Biden has pledged to take all the U.S. troops out by, or at least all the combat troops out by August 31st. That remains on track. So John Kirby of the Pentagon just saying that is the window that they're looking at now for the length of time that these troops will be in Afghanistan. But the State Department spokesperson at pains to suggest that they weren't taken by surprise. This is always just one of many contingency plans that they had at their disposal.
That's not true. This is not a full evacuation. This is not
Preparation, I said.
We are, and I think it's a very important distinction between planning and contingency planning. Right now, we are, the embassy remains open. We will continue to have a diplomatic presence on the ground to fulfill these important functions. Now, of course, the safety, the security, the welfare, the well-being of American citizens serving overseas is of the utmost priority to this president. So, of course, we are undertaking prudent contingency planning. That's precisely what we did to lead us here today.
And that spokesperson not confirming the reports that we've heard that Zalmay Khalilzad in Doha is trying to get assurances from the Taliban that they won't attack the U.S. embassy if they do take Kabul. However, and that's actually in return for aid, actually, if the Taliban does take control of Kabul. However, making it very clear, though, that if the Taliban does attack U.S. assets, the U.S. will respond forcefully.
Shihab Rattanzi, thank you very much indeed. Well, a third day of those talks that Shihab was referring to, aimed at getting Afghan government and Taliban representatives to the negotiating table, have ended without apparent progress. Mohammed Jamjoom has the latest from the meetings in Doha.
Day 3 of the Afghan talks here in Doha has concluded, and just as in the previous 2 days, very few concrete details have emerged. Not even a statement by the diplomats involved, the envoys, or any of the delegations has been issued, which would very much seem to indicate that there was disagreement amongst the participants as to the language of a statement. Now, over the course of these past 3 days, many of the participating diplomats have been loath to speak on the record as to what exactly is going on, as to the substance of the discussions. What we know as to what happened today is that there have been several meetings. There were 2 separate meetings, one that was held between the Afghan government delegation and the assembled envoys, and then a few hours later there was a separate meeting held between the Taliban delegation and the envoys who have assembled here. Once that meeting that was being held with the Taliban had finished, the rest of the diplomats walked out. Nobody spoke to the press. No joint statement was issued, and it's very unclear at this hour what exactly is going to happen next. There had been a statement issued by the Afghan government delegation. This was issued in the name of Dr. Abdullah, who is the head of the High Council for National Reconciliation in Afghanistan. And that statement had said that the Afghan government delegation had presented a plan that they said would solve the crisis in Afghanistan to the diplomats here, as well as to the extended Troika countries that's comprised of the U.S., Russia, China, and Pakistan, in which they said that they did seek to continue negotiations and that they thought having a mediator in those negotiations for intra-Afghan talks would be a good idea. Whether or not there will be another session of intra-Afghan peace dialogue or talks, that's still very much an open question right now. The last meeting of intra-Afghan peace talks was held in Doha in mid-July. That ended with very little momentum for the process to go on. At the moment, there is very little momentum for it as well because of all the gains that the Taliban has made in Afghanistan, at least for these past several days. And that's really one of the big concerns of the diplomats that have been here, is how exactly will they have the Taliban come to the table when the Taliban is gaining so much momentum in the country. Everybody who's been here the past few days has said that they are very concerned about what's going on in Afghanistan, that they have tried to come up with some sort of plan to deal with the rapidly deteriorating situation on the ground in Afghanistan.